Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Blazing Bishop Breakdowns. I'm the Blazing Bishop, aka Liam Murphy. Today, we're going to be looking at a special game from the brand new youngest Grandmaster in the history of chess. His name is, he goes by as Abhimanyu Mishra, and he reached the Grandmaster title at 12 years, 4 months, and 25 days. Taking the youngest Grandmaster in history from Sergei Karyakin, who got it at 12 years and 7 months, who famously went on to challenge Magnus Carlsen for world champion, where Magnus did win. But if Mishra can continue on the path that Sergei did and become a world champion qualifier one day, that would be awesome. He is an American kid, and funny enough, at the U.S. Amateur Team Tournament that happens in New Jersey, my team of friends, where it's a team tournament, it's 4 versus 4, my team got to play his team, and we're going to be looking at a game between himself and Board 1, where my Board 1 is a player by the name of Master Fikiet. He is a master, and this game was played in the 2019 U.S. Amateur Team East. They were both Board 1 for our teams. This game lasted a long time. I got to watch it live, and I thought it'd be cool to look at this game since a lot of people have covered the game that he played to reach the Grandmaster title, which for those who don't know, to become a Grandmaster, you need to reach a certain rating threshold, and you also need to get your 3 Grandmaster norms. And so this game is between GM Mishra, who I believe he was an IM at the time, and Master Fikiet, a master who lives in New York City and a chess coach. So I talked to Alex before I filmed this video, and he told me he did a little bit of preparation for this game. He was excited to play a strong player like him, an up-and-coming player, very confident that he would reach Grandmaster one day. We didn't think he'd become the youngest Grandmaster in history, but kudos to him, he did. And so he did some prep, used some databases to prepare, used the chess.com analysis engine to look over some computer lines, because he was fairly confident of how he would play. So the game started at c4, the English opening. Mishra plays knight f6, knight f3 from Fikiet, g6, knight c3, just developing our pieces here, d5, striking at the center, capturing with the pawn, the knight captures, and queen b3, hitting the knight twice. The knight retreats to b6 for safety, and d4 from white to grab space and allow the bishop to develop. Bishop g7 is played to put pressure on the d-pawn with minor pieces, and bishop f4 is played from white here, developing their bishop. Bishop e6 is played from black, hitting the queen. And again, Fikiet told me that he was fairly confident that Mishra would go into this line, and so he played queen a3, a bit of an unusual looking move, but one day it could put some pressure on this e-pawn. Castling, e3, knight d7, again developing our pieces, making moves to solidify the center here. Rook a d1, lining the rook up with the queen, not where the queen wants to be lined up with. c6, making a very strong center, and knight g5 here from white, saying, I want to get rid of this bishop, and black plays bishop d5, saying, fine, you can have my bishop, but if you do, I want to put a knight in the center of the board or a pawn, and white ends up playing e4. Having 2 pawns in the center, a very strong center from white here, Mishra plays bishop c4, saying, let's trade the bishops. And white says, okay, I haven't moved this bishop yet, so I will develop with a trade. So I get rid of my bishop for your bishop that's moved once, twice. Black captures back, hitting the queen, and queen b3 is played, hitting the knight. This prompts black to play b5, trying to get a permanent knight on the square. It's not a permanent outpost, but it's a temporary outpost where white needs to get b3 to be able to give this knight a kick. Oop, forgive me, that did not happen. E5 is played from Fikiet here, saying, I want this bishop to be a bad piece, staring at a granite wall, and also vacating this E4 square, which perhaps one of his knights would like to jump in here. H6 hit the board, giving the G5 knight a kick, and he jumped it into F3 rather than E5, defending the D4 pawn. A6 is played from black, just improving a bit of space, defending B5, and white finally castles. Black plays C5. So A6 was played to defend the B5 pawn, freeing up the C pawn, trying to undermine white's center and free the bishop's site. White plays A4, saying, I want to target this. They thrust this A pawn, a bit of a minority attack idea where they hit this B5 pawn, and the idea is that white would like to capture back, and now they have this weakness where their queen and knight are coordinated attacking it. Black captures on D4, getting rid of their powerful center pawn. White captures on B5, saying if you take my knight, I get to take your knight. Black captures on E5, taking the pawn. So this game's getting pretty crazy. Some minor mistakes being made by both sides. White picks up the D pawn here. Super complicated game. And black plays queen C8, a very quiet move. Anytime the queen just moves one square, it's a quiet move. It's no longer defending E7, and it's lining up with the C file here. White jumps their knight into D5. So knights like the center of the board, and notice that 3 of the knights of the 4 are in the center right now. White's knights, of course, are threatening knight E7, forking the queen and the king. Black plays queen B7, saying, okay, you can have this pawn, but now my queen is a fantastic chess piece, and white does take the pawn. So let's take a pause here to look at the material. White has 5 pawns, but this is not a healthy pawn, and black has 4 pawns. So white is up by 1 pawn. Here, black plays king H7 because they were in check, and white plays queen G3. Not only lining up this queen and bishop battery here, but also getting this queen closer to the king and trying to attack the king a bit. Black plays rook A to E8. A bit of a mistake, which white capitalizes with the amazing move, knight E7 to F5. Wow, what is going on here? A knight sacrifice. This game, guys, by the way, was played at a very slow time control, where both players had a lot of time to think. So you don't just make the move knight F5 without making sure it's a good move. So black accepts the sacrifice, and white takes with the knight, where, you know, pop quiz here, if black just plays a move like queen B6, what will white do? Well, of course, queen takes G7 would be checkmate. The game is over. Of course, the youngest GM in history does not fall for that. They have to stop this, and they stop it with rook F to G8, which it's not really what the rook wants to be doing, passively defending this bishop. Perhaps one day it does have a future lined up with the king. It's a bit of a brave move for white to tempt black into this. I know I would be a bit worried with this queen and rook coordinated on G2, but white has a plan, and it starts with knight to D6. So they are forking the queen and the rook here, looking to get back their material that they just lost. And black plays queen B6 here. Now, here was the moment of the game that Alex Fikiet actually could have won the game with a really strong move. He just missed this move. So pause your video if you need some time. Find this move. I don't think I would have found it over the board. Very obviously both players missed it. The move that white could have played would have been bishop to E3, hitting the queen. And let's just look at one line of how this helps white. The black queen can come to A5. And kind of the idea of this is that you're chasing the queen away from where she needs to be. She needs to be helping over by the king side or putting pressure here. She does not want to be over here. And so white would follow it up with rook A1. And the black queen could come to B4. Here, white would finally get their material with knight takes E8. The rook would take back. And then white would capture the A pawn with their B pawn, where this rook and bishop coordinating on this pawn would just make all of black's pieces really passive, and white would just be in a dominating position looking to queen this pawn. Unfortunately for Mr. Fikiet, he did not find bishop e3. Instead, he took the rook right away, which that's a pretty practical move, guys. I would be definitely looking to get back my material pretty quick if I sacrificed a knight. Of course, he wished he found bishop e3, but so okay, so he did knight takes e8. The rook takes back, and here he takes the a pawn and the queen takes. So again, let's take a pause and compare the material. Queen versus queen, one rook versus a rook, and now we have these bishop versus bishop. We have 2 knights and 2 pawns versus a rook and 4 pawns. So 9 points versus 8 on paper, but not easy to win for either side. White's the one probably playing for a win here. The black king's just a little less safe, but it's really hard to face these minor pieces which can coordinate and defend well together. So white plays queen h3, putting some pressure on this h-pawn, and black plays queen e6, looking to trade queens. White obliges the trade, queen takes e6, the rook takes back, and Fikiet finally gets his last piece into the game with rook f to e1. And then black plays rook b6, hitting the pawn. By the way, guys, at this point, I was watching this game. I watched the rest of this game. I remember Mishra's dad was giving him like little snacks and milk during the game, which is pretty cool to see the parental support. It was a long chess game. Bishop e3 hits the board, hitting the rook. Rook b7, f4, giving the knight a kick. And basically white's hope is to get these pawns rolling down the board and try to get black to have to sacrifice a piece or get a queen. Black plays knight g4, hitting the bishop. White wants to trade their bishop for the bishop, but not for the knight. And black says, fine, let's trade. The rook captures back. You can't take this pawn because you would lose your rook. Knight f6 hits the board, b4. And so he's advancing his pawns here. And king g7. And it's just a really bit of a fortress that black is setting up. And it's not easy for white to get this one pawn rolling versus these knights, nor is it easy to get these 3 pawns rolling with these 2 pawns defending. So h3 hits the board, h5, and at this point in the game, both sides agreed to a draw. For those who have never been to the U.S. Amateur Team East tournament, the way it works is the top 10 or so boards are behind these velvet ropes. So if our team had won this game, we would have been playing behind the velvet ropes. That's kind of our goal every year. Unfortunately, we did not win this game as a team. Fikiet did his job and drew the youngest GM in history. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this game. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy this content. And I'm really excited to watch the progress of the youngest GM in history as he progresses in his chess career. Goodbye.